Hello, everyone. It's great to be here. And we are here to talk about what might be one of the hottest topics of the moment, and that is really financing the sustainability revolution that 70,000 people are descending upon this country as we speak to puzzle over, to think about, to debate over the next 2 weeks. And we're very lucky to have someone who's been thinking about this and putting his money where his mouth is for quite some time now, Prince Khaled. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
I know you've thought a lot about the nature of impact investing, about looking at different kinds of returns, not simply looking at financial returns, which of course are essential, but also thinking about other kinds of returns when you make your investments. You're early into biotech, you're early into thinking about climate tech investing. Can you give us a snapshot as somebody who is experienced with both risk as well as thinking about multiple kinds of reward? What is the moment in which we find ourselves? We're setting the table in a way for the COP dialogues that are coming, and finance is a very important and contentious thread for that event. How do you give a snapshot of the opportunity as well as really the challenge that we have at the moment?
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu salam ala rasulillah. Your Highness, distinguished guests, thank you very much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure being here representing my country in Abu Dhabi Finance Week. So I love your question. So one of the most important things that we found out at KBW Ventures, since we've been investing in this and the sustainability aspect, and about 8 or 9 years ago, it really depends on the entrepreneur that we're investing in, the sector we're investing in, and really not handcuffing ourselves in a specific sector. So we are really sector agnostic, and what we've seen is that food tech has really been overlooked when it comes to climate change and especially for our region, food security. We can't talk about food sustainability without talking about food security. And I think during the last the 2 years that we suffered through the COVID pandemic, I think this region really did dodge a bullet when it comes to food sustainability and food security. It could have been a lot worse, and I think right now what we've seen with ADGM, with companies like NIF, they really see the importance of investing in companies that have food security in their forefront. So NIF, obviously, as you've seen, maybe who has seen this recently, they invested in Blue Nalo, one of our portfolio companies. We invested in there about 6 years ago. They recently led their round with other obviously reputable venture capital firms. But really, this region definitely sees the future on the importance of food sustainability and obviously climate change.
And within that food security question, there's a lot involved with that, of course. The role of innovation, particularly where you focus as a venture investor, what is the most interesting area on which you're placing bets? Synthetic biology obviously has enormous promise. Genetic modification has for a while, and people like Bill Gates have been calling for a new GM revolution or green revolution for Africa in agriculture. Where are you placing your bets?
So we're not necessarily bearish, or we're not necessarily overlooking any industry that you mentioned. So GMs are definitely one of the ones that are on the table, especially when it comes to biology. So we've been the first investors in plant-based proteins and cellular agriculture. Cellular agriculture for us really does draw the roadmap for a really brighter future for sustainability. Greenhouse gas emissions from the animal agriculture industry represents roughly 20% of the climate effect. And we can easily mitigate that through technology. Obviously, scalability runs a huge issue with that, but we're actually solving these issues as we speak right now. Companies like Upside Foods, who are leading the way when it comes to cellular agriculture, we're going to be hearing some really important news and really big news from them, I would say, in the coming year or two when it comes to scalability. So I think scalability really marks a huge important role in any decision making for any company to invest into these sectors.
And we've seen companies like Impossible scale. So we are seeing penetration of alternative proteins. There are questions, of course, acceptability and so on, but the climate aspect you point out is clear. Agriculture, methane emissions are a huge topic of discussion at this COP that's coming up. The Economist have just have a leader and lead story in this week's Economist arguing the case for methane control, initially with oil and gas, but clearly agriculture and the sources that you talk about will be more challenging, and innovation could play a role there, presumably.
Sure. I mean, if we only take a small example, I mean, if we were to work on replacing 11% of the meat of the meat protein that's being produced in the world and make it into either plant-based or cellular agriculture-based, we can easily mitigate about 5.5 gigatons, which is roughly, so if I were to put it in context, the U.S. entirely produces about 5.5 gigatons a year of greenhouse gas emissions.
Right.
So 11% is a huge number, and when it comes to perspective.
You know, to paraphrase an old saying from the U.S. Congress, a gigaton here, a gigaton there. Pretty soon we're talking about real emissions reductions, right? So it's worth scaling to that
point.
effect. If you don't talk gigaton, don't come talk to me, right?
That's a really good
the other
point, exactly.
half of that adage. I wanted to talk about the outlook for investment, since we are obviously here at one of the climate finance capitals of the world, an aspiring center and hub for future climate finance. This is, I'm reminded of Dickens, this is the best of times and also the worst of times in some ways for climate tech finance, for clean investing. Obviously, the opportunity is huge. We see the momentum of the COP, but also the opportunity to dramatically increase clean energy investments, policy support, whether it's the IRA law in the US or European support on methane just passed a few days ago at the European Union, as well as China continuing to invest. But we also see, of course, the headwinds.
Yes.
An era of inflation, higher interest rates.
True.
A lot of renewables and low carbon projects are high capex, low opex. That tends to be a challenge in high interest rate environments to invest. And so and the kind of risk environment we're in, especially for developing countries that need to get the trillions of capital in climate that needs to come, not billions, but trillions per annum that the IEA forecasts. How do you deal with this, but what could be potentially a challenging few years in investing in this space for startups, bridging that, what's called the bridge to bankability, to scaling towards commercial markets?
Well, I think there are a number of ways that you can mitigate that. Well, I think putting a lot of not the blame, but putting a lot of the responsibility on consumers is very unfair. I think corporations need to lead the way. I think governments need to lead the way. And obviously, if you ask me, the capital of the world when it comes to leading the way for for mitigating climate change is the Middle East, is Riyadh and Abu Dhabi. There's no doubt about it. So really mitigating that responsibility off of the consumer and actually placing it on governments and placing it on corporations is the right approach.
So, a popular point. I can see some startups that are capital starved looking for funding applauding, but hopefully there are also people who are holding the purse, ready to open up the purse to share the money as well. Let's see if we can get both sides of the equation together here.
Yeah, so there are a number of ways that we have to mitigate this, but obviously this is one way. Obviously, the other ways are creating funds like Breakthrough Energy Ventures. Breakthrough Energy Ventures is a portfolio. Sorry, Breakthrough Energy Ventures, Al-Wali Philanthropies, which is my father's philanthropic arm, has invested in Breakthrough Energy Ventures. And I think Breakthrough Energy Ventures is one of the leading organizations that can really help out in making these big claims. More importantly, one organization is not going to make a difference. We have to have a collective effort with a lot of organizations working on moonshot ideas, because at the end of the day, as much as I do believe in climate change, I am not necessarily a doomsday believer, but there is nothing wrong with acting with urgency. Now, whether we believe that the climate crisis is going to be disastrous in the next 5 years, the next 50 years, it doesn't make a difference for me. The most important thing is to act with urgency right now to mitigate anything that might happen. And we're actually feeling the effects of it now. So climate deniers, I'm not sure what Kool-Aid they're drinking, but we need to move away from that and actually and actually move into in reality.
So how do you leave aside those with their heads in the sand, the ostrich climate deniers? If you just have hard-headed market realists who say, look, we have fiduciary responsibilities. We invest to make returns, and we have pensioners that depend on us. We can't be throwing money away at every crazy idea that comes along. When you hear that more conventional kind of challenge to what should be the good stewards of a country's patrimony, right? Sovereign wealth
Sure.
funds are meant to be
Sure.
saving those resources and husbanding them and investing them in wise ways for the future of the country's own next generations.
Yeah.
What's the case you make, especially in this part of the world,
Mhm.
which is blessed with a natural bounty of fossil resources as well as an untapped bounty thus far of sun and other renewable resources? How do you make that case to open up the purse and invest in the future?
Well, I think this region has been monumental and a poster child for the world when it comes to extracting wealth from fossil fuel. What are they using it is the question, and
Right.
we're clearly look where we are. We're clearly using it in the right direction. I mean, we've seen sovereign wealth funds from PIF, from Abu Dhabi, from all the sovereign wealth funds in Abu Dhabi, leading with the Mubadala and them all. We really see a huge amount of capital being invested in this area. The more important thing is, I think sovereign wealth funds, by definition, have the responsibility to their people for investing into these sectors, but creating smaller funds rather than these giant larger funds, because at the end of the day, innovation is what's going to drive change, and innovation is not going to drive change with companies that are capitalized at $1 billion. They're going to be the young entrepreneurs who are starting their businesses in their backyard and their garage and whatever you want to call it. But in regards to the check sizes, sovereign wealth funds aren't really going to do much of an impact. It's the venture capital companies that are going to make the biggest impact. Then they will lead to the sovereign wealth funds, who can take it on from there.
Very interesting. There is another area in which I think you've had some investments. That's in real estate property markets.
Sure.
There is a interesting set of challenges that sector poses, and including faces from climate change, rising sea levels, other forms of challenges that are affecting property questions. Can you talk a little bit how you think about the role of risk management in thinking about one of the world's biggest sectors, which is property, which tends to be quite conservative, old-fashioned in its application and use of things like artificial intelligence, let's say, for analytics and thinking about future of risk?
Luckily for us, most of our real estate developments are away from the shore, so I think we're safer than. I'm kidding.
Well, there'll be
we
other
actually-
weather effects, I'm
we
sure.
actually just lost a really good one on the Palm. But regardless of that, I think one of the most important things that we're dealing with is how we work with states and governments and state funds to see how we can work together in terms of work with sustainable practices. So recycling water would be a really important thing. We've already done that in Sharjah. We're working on a lot more things when it comes to, for example, having a nursery, our tree nursery rather. We have about roughly 250,000 trees that we've planted ourselves, and we've bought from international entities, and we're making sure that every one of our developments is actually forested. So really, we have to. What we're looking at is we're not looking at this as a selling point for how green our developments are, but more importantly, how we can mitigate a lot of the energy consumption that these houses are going to need for the future. I mean, we've seen record highs happening this summer, and it's not an accident. You know, we've seen record highs in Saudi Arabia and other places around the world, and we really need to mitigate these things through natural conservation as well as innovation.
What kind of interest are you finding among consumers, property buyers, let's say? You mentioned earlier we shouldn't put the entire onus on them. That's fair.
Yeah.
But at the same time, are you seeing any shifting attitudes at all in this region in terms of being willing to go for green properties, or being willing to make a choice or preference in favor that might help the developers?
As a matter of fact, we have a number of salesmen in our roster in our company. Obviously, we deal with a lot of externals, but a lot of the questions that come through to Arada, which is our real estate investment arm at KBW Ventures, is sustainability. Is how are the houses cooled? Is the water circulated? How much greenery is there? How many trees are there, etc. So and by the way, we do get people walking away if it's not enough for them. So the buyers are definitely there, and the quality they're asking for doesn't reflect only in luxury, but also reflects on the necessity of having a greener house to drive their decision. So I'm really pleased to see a lot of consumers adopting this type of mentality.
That's very interesting. That's good to see, especially in this region. There's one other area I wanted to dig into a little bit. I know you've got some views on green technologies.
Sure.
When we think about energy, there's a huge amount of interest in this part of the world in hydrogen. And I wondered, how do you handicap the landscape for green hydrogen, blue hydrogen, of course, made from fossil fuels with carbon sequestration? There's even a quest for natural or geologic hydrogen that's taking off in Oman and other places. That's another frontier kind of area where venture capital is pouring in. What's your perspective on this? How excited are you, or are you a skeptic?
No, we're not really a skeptic. Honestly, we look at that landscape as an entirety. So we don't look at one green hydrogen or other types of green energy. But I am extremely bullish on nuclear, especially when it comes to the new era of nuclear, not the 1960s, 1950s, and 70s nuclear.
So the small
reactors.
modular reactors.
The small modular reactors are really, really important to us. We have a number of network investors and entrepreneurs that we tap into and we talk to on a regular basis, especially when it comes to these types of reactors. And we're extremely bullish on that regard. Obviously, we've seen the UAE jumpstart when it comes to their nuclear program, and we'd love to see a lot more happening in the region. And hopefully, we would, as KBW Ventures, we would love to lead the role in terms of these smaller modular reactors.
So, as a longtime advocate of nuclear energy at The Economist, we argued if you are serious about climate change, you would keep it on the table as an option.
100% you'd keep it on the table.
I'm
and remove a lot of bureaucracies around it, unfortunately.
Right. But the new generation of smaller, more modular approaches clearly has a lot of promise. But let's speak frankly. There have been some setbacks of late.
There has been.
The leading project in the U.S. has just wound up shop because costs grew out of control. We have seen similarly challenges at some of the other early movers. A lot of them appear to be related to financing costs, as well as the traditional supply chain or delays, which may be related to the financing costs.
Sure, I think.
What do you think, as a finance guy? What can we do about this problem?
So there have been a lot of aspects that really dealt a heavy hand when it comes to investing into these technologies. COVID didn't really help a lot, especially with a lot of the policies that the U.S. adopted towards China. So we understand, because I sit on the board of Al Walid Philanthropy. Al Walid Philanthropy invested in Fund 1 of Breakthrough Energy Ventures. One of their portfolio companies was a modular nuclear reactor. I believe that they were going to do some tests in China. Unfortunately,
it got blocked.
It did get blocked.
Yeah.
So that's a huge setback. And when we're talking about nuclear setbacks, that's at least a 3-year setback. And right now they're restarting it right now, and they're talking. And I believe there are talks to do it in the U.S. But unfortunately, the U.S. has a lot of red tape when it comes to nuclear. I mean, to even talk about nuclear reactors, I believe to get from point one to actually getting an agreement done to start a nuclear reactor is 25 to 40 years. So it's as opposed to other places around the world, which would take 8 years or so.
Right.
So we really have to cut the red tape from that regard and actually just start things moving, because the technology shifted and changed a lot since the 1960s.
We have just 30 seconds. Now, we've talked about a number of the reasons why this might be the worst of times for impact investing. In 30 seconds, give us a quick positive view on how it could become the best of times. What's the one thing you'd like to see most to improve the picture?
There is never a bad time to invest in sustainability. I mean, even though we have there are headwinds right now when it comes to the rising cost of food, the rising cost of energy, still governments need to put in earmark a large amount of capital just to invest into these sustainable technologies, because there is no wrong time. Sorry, there's no right time. The right time is right now.
Excellent. All right. On that inspirational note, I will thank you for your kind thoughts. Please give Frizz Khalid a round of applause.